Every morning you wake up with a choice. You can drift into the day and let your brain chase the world, or you can anchor your mind, your body, and your biology for peak performance. I'm not here to give you hacks. I'm here to give you protocols based on neuroscience that I use every single day to optimize my focus, energy, and mental clarity. Because how you start your day doesn't just influence your morning, it programs your brain for the entire day. Slight pause, lean in. So today I'm going to walk you through exactly how I start my day for peak performance, step by step, and share the 5 key principles you can use to optimize your mornings and take back control of your brain. Every morning within the first 30 minutes of waking, I do something that might seem almost too simple to matter, but it's absolutely foundational for how I function throughout the rest of the day. I get outside and expose my eyes to natural sunlight, not through a window, not looking at my phone screen. I go outside and let the natural light of the morning sun hit my eyes directly. This isn't a wellness ritual or a motivational habit, it's neuroscience. What most people don't realize is that your eyes are not just tools for seeing the world, they are literally extensions of your brain. And inside the retina, there are specialized cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells are not involved in forming images, they exist to detect the presence of light, specifically blue light from the sun, and send powerful signals deep into the brain. The moment these cells are stimulated, they activate a part of the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is the brain's master clock. When this clock gets the signal that light is present, it starts a cascade of biological events. Cortisol, often labeled a stress hormone, is released, but not in a way that makes you feel stressed. In this context, it's incredibly beneficial. It's like a natural wave of alertness, helping you feel awake, focused, and ready to engage with the day. Your body temperature starts to rise, metabolism increases, and your brain begins producing key neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine, which enhance motivation, attention, and mood. In fact, studies show that early light exposure increases dopamine tone throughout the day, something that's critical not only for productivity but also for protecting against depression and burnout. But there's another important piece. This exposure to light also sets a timer in your brain for when to start releasing melatonin, the hormone that helps you sleep. That timer runs for about 14 to 16 hours. So by getting sunlight first thing in the morning, you're not just waking up your brain, you're programming it to know when to wind down later in the evening. Your sleep that night becomes better, deeper, and more restorative. It's a complete circadian loop. Morning light sets up nighttime sleep. The key, though, is intensity. Indoor lighting, no matter how bright, simply does not compare to the photon density of sunlight. On an overcast day, outdoor light is still 10 to 100 times brighter than indoor light, and brightness is what those retinal cells are sensitive to. So even just 2 to 10 minutes outside, depending on how sunny or cloudy it is, can be enough to trigger these beneficial pathways. For me, this is non-negotiable. I wake up, I hydrate, and then I go outside. Sometimes I'll take a walk, sometimes I'll just stand on my balcony or in my backyard. But what I'm doing in that moment is aligning my brain with nature's clock. I'm creating biological momentum. That single act influences my ability to focus, to think clearly, to feel emotionally balanced, and to sleep deeply later on. It's the first input I give to my nervous system each day, and one of the most powerful things I can do to prime my brain for high performance. Most people never think about light as a performance tool, but in the world of neuroscience and human optimization, it's one of the most effective, zero-cost, high-impact levers you can pull. When you understand that your brain is listening to your environment, before you even drink your coffee, you start to realize just how powerful your first morning choices can be. After getting sunlight in my eyes to set my internal clock, the next thing I do is move. Not a workout, not a full training session, just movement. Intentional, deliberate physical activity. This might be as simple as a brisk walk, a few rounds of mobility drills, jumping jacks, or dynamic stretching. What matters is that my body moves before my mind is flooded, before I look at my phone, check emails, or let the world in. This early movement, done before any digital stimulation, is an incredibly powerful signal to the brain and nervous system. It shifts you from a passive, reactive state into one of control, readiness, and engagement. Here's what's happening under the surface. Movement triggers a coordinated cascade of neurochemical and physiological responses. When you begin moving your body, proprioceptive signals, essentially feedback from muscles and joints, are sent up to the brain. These signals tell the brain, we are awake, we are active, it's time to switch on. This stimulates areas of the brain involved in alertness, attention, and executive function, especially regions of the prefrontal cortex and the reticular activating system. This system is key to arousal and alertness. It determines whether you're foggy or focused, reactive or deliberate. At the same time, movement increases blood flow and oxygen delivery to the brain. It elevates your heart rate slightly, which in turn promotes the release of norepinephrine and dopamine. These chemicals enhance motivation, drive, and the ability to sustain attention. In short, this is a neurochemical upgrade. It's a way to tune your brain chemistry before you've had caffeine or even a bite to eat. Now, why do I move before stimulation, before I check my phone or expose myself to social media, messages, or digital inputs? Because the first inputs your brain receives in the morning are incredibly powerful. They set the tone for your attentional filter. The brain is a prediction machine. It looks for patterns. It sets expectations. If the first thing you give it is reactive, something that hijacks your attention, you're literally training it to chase distraction. You're creating a loop of fragmented focus that continues all day. But when you move first, and move with intention, you're telling your brain, we are leading the day. We are in charge. Even short bursts of movement can have lasting benefits. Just 3 to 5 minutes of full-body dynamic motion, arm circles, squats, light jumping, shadow boxing, can dramatically shift your internal state. It wakes up the vestibular system, which governs balance and spatial awareness, and increases the brain's ability to orient attention and process information quickly. It's not about burning calories, it's about activating circuits in the brain that say, I'm ready. This also has a deep connection to stress regulation. Physical movement activates the sympathetic nervous system, but in a structured, healthy way. It provides a controlled dose of stimulation that primes you for stress resilience later in the day. Your brain learns to tolerate and respond to elevated arousal levels. So when you inevitably face challenges, emails, deadlines, or unexpected events, your system is already trained to handle that energy. It's not overwhelmed by it. I've noticed that on the days when I skip this step, when I go straight to my phone or sit too long in the early morning, I feel slower, more reactive, and more anxious. My thoughts feel scattered. But when I begin the day by moving, before the world demands my attention, I feel clear, steady, and in control. My decisions come easier, my thinking becomes sharper, and my ability to focus, without distraction, is significantly improved. It's such a simple shift, but it changes everything. Movement before stimulation creates a foundational sense of ownership over your day. It's a message to your brain and body. I move first. I choose the inputs. I create the momentum. And that one act of ownership, done consistently, is one of the most neurologically powerful things you can do to unlock peak performance. After I've exposed my eyes to natural light and engaged in early movement, I turn inward. This is the part of the morning that's not about doing more, but about doing less with intention. Before diving into emails, conversations, or even planning the day, I spend time in a state of deliberate calm. This could take the form of mindfulness, breath work, or what I often refer to as physiological sighs, a specific breathing pattern designed to regulate the nervous system. And while it might seem like a luxury or a soft practice, in reality it's one of the most scientifically powerful tools I use to prepare my brain for high performance. When you wake up, your brain is transitioning from a state of neural idling, low activity, often characterized by delta and theta brainwaves, to a state of high alertness and readiness. But too often, that transition is hijacked by stress. The phone rings, a text lights up, the mind starts racing. We go from zero to overwhelmed in minutes. What I've learned through both research and personal experience is that inserting a moment of intentional stillness right after early movement creates a bridge between the body and the mind. It creates coherence. That coherence isn't just emotional, it's physiological, it's measurable. One of the most effective tools I use in this space is a simple two-step breathing technique called the physiological sigh. It's a deep inhale through the nose, followed immediately by a second, shorter inhale to fully inflate the lungs, followed by a slow, extended exhale through the mouth. This pattern mimics what the body naturally does during sleep, or when we're trying to calm down after crying. It's built into our biology. When practiced deliberately, 2 to 5 rounds, It has been shown to rapidly reduce levels of carbon dioxide in the bloodstream, slow the heart rate, and shift the body from sympathetic fight-or-flight dominance into parasympathetic rest and digest tone. This isn't about relaxation in the way we usually think of it. It's about neural control. It's about increasing your capacity to regulate your internal state, on demand. Mindfulness, too, fits into this window. Even 5 minutes of focused attention, either on the breath, a mantra, or simply observing thoughts without judgment, has dramatic effects on the prefrontal cortex. This is the area of the brain responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and forward planning. When we engage in mindfulness, especially in the early part of the day, we're literally strengthening the neural networks that govern focus, discipline, and self-regulation. We're setting the tone not just emotionally, but neurologically. There's also a deeper reason I practice this form of stillness before engaging with the outside world. It's because we live in a hyper-stimulated environment. Notifications, emails, social media, news, it's all designed to fragment your attention and hijack your nervous system. By carving out a space for inner calm, even for just a few minutes, I'm inoculating myself against that chaos. I'm training my system to respond instead of react. This state of internal stability becomes a buffer, a kind of neural armor, that I carry into the rest of the day. And over time, the effects compound. I've found that when I begin the day with this kind of intentional stillness, I'm not just more focused, I'm more emotionally grounded. My mood is more stable. I'm less reactive to stress, more adaptable to change, and more present in conversation. It's as though my brain has more bandwidth, not because I'm doing more, but because I've cleared away the noise before it even had a chance to build up. This daily practice has become a form of mental conditioning. Just as we train muscles to be stronger and more resilient, we can train the nervous system to be calmer, more focused, and more responsive. The key is consistency. This isn't a once-a-week practice. It's a daily protocol, a non-negotiable step in building a brain and body that work in harmony. It's not about achieving stillness perfectly. It's about showing up for the process, tuning in before tuning out, and building that foundation of calm before stepping into the complexity of the world. Because when your mind is clear, your choices are sharper, your reactions are slower, and your capacity to perform at your peak becomes not just possible but inevitable. One of the most overlooked yet profoundly important elements of how I start my day for peak performance has to do with how I fuel my body and brain. And what I've discovered through both scientific research and direct personal experimentation is that timing and quality of input matter just as much, if not more, than quantity. Specifically, I delay my caffeine intake for 60 to 90 minutes after waking, and I start my day with proper hydration, ideally with water that contains electrolytes. These two decisions may seem minor, but they create a massive ripple effect throughout my cognitive, emotional, and physical state for the entire day. When most people wake up, their instinct is to reach immediately for coffee. It's a culturally embedded reflex, eyes open, coffee in hand. But here's what's actually happening inside the body in those first moments of waking. As soon as you emerge from sleep, your body begins releasing cortisol, sometimes referred to as the stress hormone, but more accurately, a hormone of alertness and readiness. Cortisol follows a natural rhythm, peaking in the early part of the day, then tapering off toward the evening. Drinking caffeine immediately upon waking interferes with this natural cortisol pulse. It gives you a short-term feeling of alertness, but over time it blunts your body's own ability to produce alertness naturally. By delaying caffeine by 60 to 90 minutes, I allow my body to complete that cortisol spike on its own. What this does is preserve and even enhance the effectiveness of caffeine when I do introduce it later. I don't experience a jittery spike, followed by a crash. Instead, I get a smooth arc of energy and focus that lasts longer and feels more stable. This shift alone has dramatically improved the consistency of my energy and focus throughout the day. I'm no longer reliant on a second or third cup of coffee because the first one is working with my biology, not against it. Equally important is hydration, something even high performers often neglect. When you sleep, you lose a significant amount of water through respiration, and depending on the environment, perspiration. By the time you wake up, you are already in a mildly dehydrated state. And even mild dehydration, just a 1 to 2% reduction in total body water, can impair cognitive function, reduce mood stability, and increase fatigue. That's why one of the very first things I do is rehydrate with water, and often I add electrolytes, specifically sodium, potassium, and magnesium, not because I'm sweating or exercising yet, but because these minerals are crucial for neuronal function. Your brain communicates through electrical signals. These signals are dependent on the movement of ions across membranes, and those ions, sodium, potassium, magnesium, require proper electrolyte balance. When you're low on electrolytes, your neurons don't fire as efficiently. Your ability to think clearly, focus intently, and regulate emotions is compromised. That's why rehydrating with electrolytes early in the morning isn't just a physical act, it's a neurological investment. It sharpens cognition and stabilizes energy before any food or caffeine even enters the system. Now, some mornings I do choose to delay food for an hour or more, depending on whether I'm engaging in intermittent fasting or doing deep focus work early on. But when I do eat, I'm mindful of choosing foods that support neurotransmitter balance. High-protein foods rich in amino acids like tyrosine and tryptophan serve as precursors to dopamine and serotonin. Complex carbohydrates help stabilize blood sugar. Healthy fats fuel long-term energy and support hormone production. It's not about strict dieting or restrictive rules. It's about intentional input. What I put into my body either fuels focus or fragments it. And in the first part of the day, every input counts more than most people realize. Together, delaying caffeine and prioritizing hydration create a kind of biochemical foundation for the rest of the day. They're simple shifts, yes, but they influence everything downstream: how well I think, how long I can sustain attention, how I respond to stress, how I sleep that night. It's all connected, and once you understand that your brain isn't just reacting to what you give it, but adapting to it, sculpting its sensitivity based on what it encounters, you begin to take these morning decisions far more seriously. This isn't about perfection. There are days when routines get disrupted, when travel or stress interferes. But the more consistent I am with this practice, the more I notice a difference, not just in peak performance, but in baseline function. I'm more resilient, more stable, and more capable of doing the kind of focused, creative, high-quality work that demands not just effort, but energy that's clean, sustainable, and aligned with how the brain was designed to operate. This is not a biohack. It's biology, applied with precision. Once I've aligned my internal clock with natural light, activated my nervous system with early movement, created a calm and focused state through breathwork or mindfulness, and strategically fueled my body with hydration and delayed caffeine, I do something that might seem incredibly obvious, but is often deeply misunderstood. I take time to clearly define my intentions for the day, and I don't mean writing out a massive to-do list or mindlessly checking off tasks. I mean choosing with deliberate attention the one or two high-leverage actions that will move me closer to my long-term goals. I create clarity of purpose before the noise of the world has a chance to cloud it. This is not just a productivity trick, it's a powerful way to prime your brain for performance. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, focus, and decision-making, thrives on clarity. It needs direction. Without it, it defaults to reactivity. It jumps from one stimulus to another, pulled by urgency instead of guided by importance. So before I open my laptop or begin any kind of work, I sit in silence, even if just for a few minutes, and ask a very specific question: what would make today successful? Not in general, not in vague terms, but specifically. What are the 2 or 3 actions that, if completed with focus and integrity, would make today a meaningful step forward? The neuroscience here is striking. When you set a clear intention and visualize the process of achieving it, not just the end result but the actions themselves, you activate a brain-body feedback loop. Dopaminergic pathways begin to fire. Dopamine, contrary to popular belief, isn't about reward, it's about pursuit. It's the molecule of motivation and directed energy. When you orient your mind toward a clearly defined target, your brain begins filtering the world through that lens. It becomes easier to say no to distractions because your nervous system has already been calibrated to care about something more important. This is also where internal alignment becomes essential. When your actions match your intentions, when there's coherence between what you say matters and what you actually do, you experience a form of psychological flow. Your mind becomes more focused, your energy becomes more sustained, and your sense of satisfaction at the end of the day increases. But when there's misalignment, When you spend hours reacting to things that don't serve your goals, there's a subtle but corrosive effect on your psyche. You feel busy but unfulfilled, productive but not purposeful. That's why I protect this part of my morning. I don't allow email, messages, or even meetings to invade this space, because this is the moment I take control of the steering wheel. It's not just about mental clarity, it's about agency. Most people go through their day reacting to the environment. Notifications, requests, fires to put out. But when you begin the day by choosing your focus, you are no longer being pushed, you're pulling, you are driving. And this has another layer. It trains the nervous system for consistency. High performers aren't those who do extraordinary things occasionally. They are the ones who do the right things consistently, even when it's hard. Defining your priorities each morning reinforces this identity. It sends a message to your subconscious. This is who I am. This is what I do. These are the things that matter, and that repetition builds neural circuits of discipline and intention over time. Sometimes I'll write down these key priorities in a notebook. Other times I'll simply speak them out loud to myself. What matters is not the format, it's the clarity. The act of consciously narrowing your focus in a world that constantly tries to scatter it is itself a radical practice, and it sets the tone for everything that follows. This practice also changes how I handle challenges throughout the day, because when I know what I'm aiming for, when I've taken the time to define success, setbacks no longer derail me. They simply become obstacles to navigate, not signs to quit. That clarity gives me resilience. It becomes the anchor that keeps me focused even when things get chaotic or unpredictable. So much of peak performance isn't about doing more, it's about doing less, but doing it with more precision, more depth, and more consistency. And that starts with defining your target each morning. Not just what you want to get done, but who you want to be in the process. That single act, taking ownership of your focus, turns the rest of the day into a series of conscious choices instead of automatic reactions. And over time, that practice becomes a mindset. That mindset becomes a system, and that system becomes a life lived with purpose, clarity, and high performance, not by chance but by choice.